Look at the back of this phone and tell me it isn't one of the most Apple-inspired knockoffs you've ever seen. In fact, if you aren't a tech enthusiast and I just lied and told you this is an unreleased iPhone model that's coming out 2020, there's a good chance you'd believe me. But in reality, this is a $100 phone I've been using for the past 2 weeks, and these are my first impressions. Spoiler alert though, it's pretty nice. So before we talk substantial stuff, let me just say, one of the features of this phone that impressed me the most, while actually filming this specific video, was the build quality. So basically I was getting this aesthetic YouTuber shot. I had this phone, this shiny, smooth, slick phone, sitting right on this nice aesthetic blue couch, which also happened to be a pretty smooth couch, and as you probably guessed, yeah, a sight that would break any tech YouTuber's heart. But amazingly though, even with the phone falling like a good 3 feet onto the ground and landing straight onto the screen face down, there was not a single scratch left on the screen, or actually the screen protector I guess, and really the only thing you could actually visibly see after that tragedy was this tiny little dent on the corner. So really props to Umidigi for making this phone aesthetic YouTuber proof. So the screen is the first part of a phone that catches your eye, at least in my opinion, and the A5 Pro has a really solid screen right off the bat. It's a Full HD Plus IPS panel with an aspect ratio of just about 2:1, and it's a really good screen, honestly, for even a flagship in 2019 going into 2020. It's got just as many pixels as the Pixel 4 and significantly more than the iPhone 11, and while the underlying tech underneath all that is a little bit less flashy, it's still really solid and way more than you'd hope for in a phone at this price point. Also, what's crazy about this guy is it's got a better screen-to-body ratio than all of the iPhones and all of the Pixels released this year, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because this $100 phone has a screen that covers more of the surface area of the front than all of the $1,000 realm phones that have been released by the biggest smartphone companies this year. So from an innovation standpoint, I gotta give props to Umidigi again, because that's incredible. The A5 Pro is running Android Pie right out of the box, and that is both a blessing and a curse because you will be running the stock version of a pretty recent version of Android, but the chances that you're going to get updates to Android 10 or anything beyond that are definitely not significant. However, Android Pie suits this phone really well. It's snappy, even with a mid-range MediaTek CPU, and while I could muddy the waters with benchmarks or more specs, I'm not going to do that because I really don't have to say anything else besides that this phone is just fast. The 4 gigs of RAM is really dope to see in a $100 smartphone, and I don't know why, but it actually feels faster than the Redmi Note 7, which had a Snapdragon 660, which was a really high-end chip when it came out, so the least I could say here is that performance on this phone is really good actually. Talking about the little things, the details, the nooks and crannies of any smartphone experience, this phone is surprisingly well-rounded. It came out of the box with a screen protector on the front and a case on the back, and speaking of the back, just look at the color of this back. Huge kudos to Umidigi for not making the fancy aesthetic colored version of this phone a cent more expensive than the plain black version of this phone, and that's allowed for me to get my first non-black colored phone, and honestly, I'm kind of in love with the fancy reflections and practically mirror-like shininess of this thing. Also, 32 gigs of storage, a 4150 mAh battery, thank you again, because those are such nice specs for a phone at this price. And also, thank you again for that fingerprint reader, because although it's not the greatest I've ever used, it is also stupid fast for the price point. Really, spec-wise, this phone has been thoughtfully put together, and I know that kind of sounds cheesy for a budget smartphone from a company no one's really ever heard of, but I for one appreciate the attention to detail. The last thing I'm going to talk about before I close out this first impressions video is the camera, and I'm not going to say too much because I'm actually making a more in-detail video about the camera later on, but what I will say is that this is the most disappointing part of this phone for sure. I've never seen such poor use of a 3-camera setup with an f1.8 main, and it's kind of ridiculous how bad the camera, or I guess really more so the software, could be with this setup. Pictures can turn out decent or even good if you're patient with the software, but it really does take some effort, and I'll show you all some examples, but beyond that, you're gonna have to wait for the other video for me to get more in depth with the camera on this guy. So besides that, this has been my first impressions of the Umidigi A5 Pro, and besides me just talking about the camera and saying that it's definitely not as good as the other aspects of this phone, this really is an incredible phone for the price point. And I do want to say one thing about the price point. When I bought this phone, and I'm gonna put like receipts and screenshots on the screen, I paid $109, not even a cent more than $110, $109 for this phone. And what's kind of crazy is I went to look at the phone just a couple days ago. Like I said, I've had this phone for a couple weeks, and the phone popped up as $130. So I don't know if that's Amazon screwing me over because I've been on the page a couple times, or what's going on there. Maybe the price actually went up for everybody, but either way, just so you know, I paid $109 for this phone. That's why I've been calling it a $100 phone, because I paid $100 for it, and I apologize if the price actually did go up for everybody and it's actually $130 on Amazon now, because that sucks. But I definitely still say it was worth it for the price either way at $109 or $130, even though it was definitely a better deal for less money. Also, there's one more thing I gotta say real quick before I sign off for good, and that is something that has been bugging me since the second I took this phone out of the box. And when I did that, when I unboxed this phone, there was the screen protector, like I said, that was pre-applied on this phone, and then there was like a film that covered that. And when I was trying to take the film off, somehow I started to peel off the screen protector underneath, and that sucks because there's a little tiny bit in the corner where like the screen protector is coming off, and it annoys the living crap out of me because I'm OCD and it's just there. Anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Drop me a comment down below if you did. Let's start a conversation. Drop me a like, subscribe if you really enjoy my stuff, and I do enjoy your presence on my channel. So thank you for being here today. I'll catch you in the next video.